Hello, everyone. Welcome to this. First of all, I want to apologize for not, telling you this because I didn't even know I was going to do a series on it. Because I like to call it my movie memories, where I talk about a movie, whether it's made for television or theatrical or direct to DVD or whatever, or direct to video, basically. And I talk about my memories about it. Now, I started off surprisingly with David Copperfield from 1993. So I figured, why not follow that up with another made-for-television animated film? And this one, of course, was made way before David Copperfield was. The 93 David Copperfield film. This one was actually made, ladies and gentlemen, in 1980. That's right. When I was 1 year old, this was made. And this too, ladies and gentlemen, was released around the time of Christmas. I think it was released maybe a week or so, or 2 or 3. I can't remember. I have to look it up on Wikipedia. But basically around Christmas time, this movie was released in syndication by Hanna-Barbera, by Primetime Television. And the movie I'm talking about, of course, is Yogi's First Christmas. Now, if you don't know about this movie, I can say this. You do have an opportunity to watch it. Because if you go to a torrent, if you look online, you torrent for this movie, or you look for a torrent on this movie, you're going to find a torrent that contains all the Christmas specials, my friend. Every single Christmas special that Hanna-Barbera has done at that time, from the Smurfs to Flintstones to Yogi Bear, they will have it in that torrent package that you can find. But this film was released, like I said, on television in syndication by Hanna-Barbera in association with the Operation Primetime Television. I think that's what it was called, Operation Primetime. And this was basically a 2-hour animated Christmas film. That's what it was. Now, usually you may say to yourself, well, aren't Christmas films saved for theaters or direct to video or something like that? Or made for television Christmas movies? Aren't they supposed to be live action? Yeah, originally, yes, that's majority of the time that's true. But the thing is, there will be occasions where animated Christmas movies or holiday movies will be released directly to television before going to video. And Yogi's First Christmas, like I said, came out in 1980, in December of 1980. And I was only, like I said, about a year and a half old at the time. And I could say this, I don't remember it very well, because like I said, I was only a year and a half, but I do remember watching it as the years went on throughout, as much as I could, or when I could, throughout the 80s and then throughout the 90s. And one of the things I do like about this film, and I remember the best about it, is it was one of those, famous all-star flicks. It was one of those famous all-star flicks that Hanna-Barbera was doing throughout the 70s and the 80s. In fact, I mentioned this on my Yogi Bear deal. You can look it up. But basically, this was again, like I said, this was just a all-star movie thing, and it starred basically the primary characters associated with Yogi in a way, sort of like Yogi's gang, sort of like what Mickey Mouse is like. When you look at a show like House of Mouse or something like that, you always see Mickey along with Minnie and Goofy and Donald and Daisy and Max. That's sort of what Yogi was. Yogi always had his groupies, his gang. He had his primary gang was always Huckleberry, Snagglepuss, Oggy Doggy, Daddy Doggy, and Cindy, along with Ranger Smith. But basically, this show came out in 1980. This movie came out in 1980, and again, like I said, throughout the 80s and the 90s, I watched it as much as I could, or when I could. And I think it wasn't until maybe the late 80s, maybe the mid to late 80s, that it started to show up on cable television like TBS and then TNT. Um, I mean, it still stayed in syndication. I think most of the time when you would see it in syndication would be like on a Saturday, on a late Saturday, on an early or late Saturday or Sunday afternoon. And there were, I think, occasions, I'm not really sure, that you would see it during the basically the early to mid, like the late morning, mid, early, like I said, the late morning, early afternoon, if you will. They would show it in syndication at times, and of course they kept it, and of course they kept the tradition of keeping it in prime time as well. But again, like I said, it wasn't until I think about the late 80s or something like that, mid to late 80s, that it started to show up on cable television on networks like TBS and TNT, and I think even Cartoon Network, not Cartoon Network, but the USA Network, and I think even Disney Channel had it at one time or so, and maybe a few others, and I think maybe Nickelodeon, I'm not really sure. But it was around, like I said, the mid to late 80s when it started to show more like the mid to late 80s, or the late mid to late 80s, I should say, that it started showing up in, like I said, on cable television, on channels like I said, TBS, TNT, USA, Disney Channel, Nickelodeon. And this was before they brought out Cartoon Network and Boomerang. So it would appear on those channels at times, depending on which channel had it what year. And then of course throughout the 90s it was primarily shown on TBS, TNT, and then when Cartoon Network was created in the early 90s, it was broadcast on there. And then of course when Boomerang came around in the 90s as well, it was broadcast on there as well, but they still kept it broadcast on Cartoon Network, which was pretty cool. And I remember throughout the 90s, at Christmas time, I would try to watch it. And, here's the thing. I lived with my father, and my father was okay with me watching it maybe just once, maybe let me watch it twice. But that was about it. Because, my father, in a way, was kind of like the guy who was like, okay, you've seen it once, that's enough. That's enough, okay? We don't have to see it again. But if he felt like, there was nothing really else on for us to watch or for me to watch, I'd watch it again. And it wasn't until about the first year I was out on my own that I was able to finally record it to VHS. Basically what happened is that I moved out of Oskaloosa, Kansas, where I was living for 6 years or so, almost 6 years. And I moved to Lawrence, Kansas. And in that first year, I was able to record Yogi's First Christmas off of Cartoon Network because it was still being showcased there. And it would be showcased on Cartoon Network up until I think about 2007, 2008, I believe. Maybe 2000. I think until about between 2007 and 2009 was when it was last shown, between those years, because it wasn't shown last year in 2010 on the network unless I missed it. But unless I missed it, and if I did, then it does. Then I'm wrong, and Cartoon Network does still broadcast it. But I didn't. From what I saw, I didn't see no advertisement for it online or anywhere else. So, but again, if I'm wrong, somebody can let me know. But again, for most of the time, even throughout the 2000s, Cartoon Network showcased it about once or twice every year during Christmas. But most of the time now it would be shown on Boomerang, maybe more than once or twice. So, but the movie to me was pretty good. I mean, I don't have anything bad to say about it. In fact, it's one of my favorite movies growing up from my childhood. It's one of my favorite holiday movies. As a matter of fact, I think I've got about 1, 2, maybe 4 or 5, perhaps. And this sounds ridiculous, but 4 or 5 DVDs. Maybe 6 DVDs. Well, let's just put it this way. Maybe about half of my holiday DVDs that I have, that I started back in about 2004, I believe, actually 2003 up till now, have Yogi's First Christmas on there. One of them from '03 till now has Yogi's First Christmas on there. There's no doubt about it. As a matter of fact, recently, because I was able to download it as part of a torrent package along with the other Hanna-Barbera Christmas specials, we have this thing on our computer in the rec room called the Windows DVD Maker. So I was actually able to make a DVD copy of the movie. That's right, I was able to make a DVD copy of the movie, and I think about 6 years before, if I remember right, it's been about 6 years ago, in 2005, I created this Yogi Bear DVD set, and my plan was to put all 3 Yogi Bear movies that featured Yogi, Boo Boo, Cindy, and Ranger Smith, put them all together in one package, and then add the first episode, the pilot episode, the origin story episode, if you will, of Yo Yogi, and maybe a few fan vids that I did. But unfortunately, that never came to be. All I could do was get the 3 movies on there because there was some damage or a scratch or so on the disc that probably would have killed it. So, but anyway, that's how much I like the movie. And I know you might say to yourself, well, Brian, that sounds like a little over-obsessive or something, right? Well, it's not over-obsessive with a movie. Basically, to me, when I add Yogi's First Christmas on all these holiday DVDs, including my Yogi Bear DVD, this is all, as well as do a DVD, as well as you use DVD Maker to make a copy of it on DVD. The reason I do this, folks, is because there's always a chance that a DVD may not work or you may lose that DVD. So, but to me, again, getting back to Yogi's First Christmas, I thought it was a great Christmas film, great 2-hour Christmas film or special, depending on how you want to look at it. I thought the story was very well done. Basically, the story is the Jellystone Lodge, which I think this is the first time we ever see it, is in jeopardy of being shut down and sold by its owner, Miss Throckmorton, I believe. I think that's her name. And she's doing it for business reasons. Because, well, one of the business reasons we find out is because there's a group of contractors or something that want to build a freeway through the lodge. Basically where the lodge is, they want to build a freeway. So Throckmorton, she decides, because she decides that because over the past few years she's been getting reports that there's been sabotage at the during the Winter Carnival, which takes place during the Christmas Winter Carnival that takes place during the Christmas time, that perhaps it's best to sell the lodge. So what happens is Ranger Smith and the manager and the hotel manager at the time, I think his name is Mr. Dingwell. That's what his name is. His name's Dingwell. They tell Yogi's friends, who we see, Huckleberry, Snagglepuss, and Augie Doggy and Daddy Doggy, that what they need to do is impress Miss Throckmorton enough that she will decide not to sell the lodge. She won't sell it. So they do the best they can, despite the fact that they're getting sabotaged still, or attempted to be sabotaged by the antagonist in the film called Herman the Hermit. Now, basically what his role is he's a hermit, basically. So you can understand, so by knowing that he's a hermit, he basically doesn't want to be disturbed. He doesn't like the noise. He doesn't like the yearly carnival and the noise and stuff that comes with it. So he wants to do everything he can to get them out of there so he can have peace and quiet. Now, you might say to yourself, well, I've never seen the movie, Brian. How does Yogi come into this? Well, basically what happens is Yogi and Boo Boo and Cindy are all hibernating. Now, at first, Yogi and Boo Boo are woken up by the singing of the friend, by the singing that the friends are doing.